Hey HSM, I'm Michael Furnahu, freshman boys small group leader. I'm married to Mandy and dad to Drew, Noah, Isaac, and Lindley. You know that phrase, living my best life? You know, people tend to use it this way. Hey, what are you doing right now? Oh man, I'm laying in a hammock, reading a book with my Sonic drink. I'm living my best life. Or, I'm on the boat, lines in the water, and I just caught my biggest fish ever. I'm living my best life. Or I just got my license. I got to drive my car across town all by myself. I'm living my best life. Let me tell you about a living my best life kind of day. So in 2010, my family packed up and moved from Michigan to Colorado Springs. As we're rolling into town, little Drew, who at the time was 6 years old, looked up at the giant mountain that overlooks Colorado Springs and said, I want to climb that. What 6-year-old Drew didn't know was that he was looking at Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak is a 14er, a mountain over 14,000 feet high. The summit's so high, trees can't grow at the top. And I said, sure, buddy, maybe when you're 7. Well, sure enough, when the next summer rolled around and he turned 7, he was committed to climbing that mountain. But climbing a mountain that size is no easy task. There's plenty of obstacles along the way. First of all, you're hiking to 14,000 feet. Oxygen is about 60% of what it is at sea level. Catching your breath looks completely different. Another thing, there's afternoon storms, which means it's a race to the top. In those storms is lightning. And did I mention there's no trees? On a hike that extreme, it's easy to get discouraged. Drew's friend had a really hard time mentally, and he just wanted to quit throughout the entire day. In fact, the first time I hiked Pikes Peak in my 20s, I wanted to quit. Another obstacle, as we got to the last 1,000 feet of our hike, we realized it was no longer a hike. It was a bit of a climb. We had to boulder our way to the top over piles and piles of large rocks. But I have to tell you about a personal obstacle I faced on the way up. About halfway up the mountain, the soles of my shoes started flapping on the front like a puppet talking to you, both of them. By the time we got to the point that we could see the summit, the back of my boots were flapping in the wind too. And when I took on the bouldering section, I had no soles on my hiking boots at all. But the reward, the sense of accomplishment and getting to the top was incredible. The view was the kind of thing that takes your breath away. You're actually above the clouds. Check out this pic with little Drew. And that doesn't even capture what we could see. And here's a secret. They have a road to the top of Pikes Peak and a store. And in that store, you can get donuts. Here's a pic of me, resting my legs, with my boots in pieces, donut in hand, living my best life. Today, we're going to continue diving into Nehemiah. God was inviting the people of Israel, specifically Judah, to live their best life. Nehemiah was leading the people to pursue that path, but there were obstacles. There was opposition. So remember last week, JR shared that Nehemiah was leading the people to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. Now in chapter 4, they've begun the work, but they're facing some major obstacles. Where I really want you to pay attention is to their response in the midst of opposition. Check it out. Now when Sanballat was a community leader, heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him. He's also a community leader. And he said, yes, what are they building? If a fox goes up on it, he'll break down the stone wall. So these guys, they were people in authority, and they're straight up taunting the people, making fun, ridiculing their work. Kind of like the guard in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries. No? Okay, well, some of you are with me on that. But they mocked the work. But check out the response of the people. It says in verse 4, "Hear, O God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives." You see, they prayed. They pressed into God. At the first sign of opposition to what they felt called to do, they ran to the one that had called them to do it. But then the opposition escalates to threats of physical violence. So verse 7, "But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry, and they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it." Let's skip to verse 11. "And our enemies said, 'They will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work.'" They're threatened with physical violence. But again, check out their response. Let's go to 13. "I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." They pressed into godly community. They relied on each other to get past the obstacles. Finally, maybe the most hurtful opposition of all, one many of us can relate to. So read with me in verse 12. "At that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, 'You must return to us.'" You see, it was their own people. Their own people were coming and saying, "Stop what you're doing. It's not safe. You can't do this. You won't be successful. Come home." Can you imagine chasing hard after God's mission, God's purpose, and your own people, your own family saying, "It's not going to work. You can't do it. You won't be successful. Quit while you can." But again, check out their response. In verse 18, "And each of the builders had his sword strapped at his side while he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me, and I said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, 'The work is great and widely spread. We're separated on the wall, far from one another. In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there.' And check this out. 'Our God will fight for us.' So we labored at the work, and half of them held the spears from the break of dawn until the stars came out." They armed themselves and they kept working. They pressed forward and pushed on despite the opposition. Nehemiah and the people kept working faithfully, and they put themselves in position to experience God's best for their life. As you chase after God's best for you, there will be opposition. There will be obstacles. How will you respond? Will you give up? Will you bow out? Or will you pray? Will you press into a community of people who will encourage your faith? Will you arm yourself with God's truth? Will you push through? You see, God is inviting you to experience His best for you, your best life. In fact, John 10:10 tells us, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy." That's the opposition, right? "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Or as the message says, more and better life than they ever dreamed of. In your small groups, you're going to dive into what the opposition looks like in your life and how your response will position you to experience God's best life for you. Here we go, HSM.